and people will find you on social media and find the most out of context tweet you've said and then email it to HR or something ridiculous like that, and say, oh, look, this
People
so-and-so
actually
said,
do
yeah,
that. I'm
yeah.
like, fuck,
I've lost count the amount of times I've had that. But a journalist took that tweet, printed it while they were in Jeddah, shoved it in Christian's face and said, is this Red Bull's official stance on the matter?
Oh, no.
And it proper kicked off.
Welcome back to the Cool Down Podcast, everyone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, get all that stuff done early doors so I don't have to ask you again, all right? We're back again, and today's guest is someone with over 5 years' experience at Red Bull Racing, and he's a top shit poster on Twitter. His real name is Dan, but you'll know him by Engine 11, Position 5, or Engine Mode 11, whatever you want to go with. Today we talk all about his Red Bull journey, his journey into Formula One, and why he's decided to jump on the cesspool that is Twitter, the platform we all love but kind of hate at the same time. So I hope you enjoy podcast 31 with Dan, otherwise known as Engine 11, Position 5. Engine 11, Position 5. First and foremost, why Engine 11, Position 5? Why not Engine 9 or 8 or 17? What's the story, man? Talk to me.
Yeah, so Engine 11, Position 5 was a radio message that went out to Max when he won Austria in, when was it, 2020? When we first had the Honda unit.
Yeah.
And it was like their first victory. And if you go back and watch it, there's a message that goes out to him that says Engine 11, Position 5, which is basically like full beans. So it became like a thing in the company.
I was going to say, so internally that became kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like Honda Racing in Japan bought out like a T-shirt with it, like a slogan on it and everything. So it sort of just became a bit of a thing. And I stuck with it, and yeah, now I get people like you asking me all the time, what does it mean?
Have you got that T-shirt?
Yeah. So Honda, the official Honda Racing account, they messaged me on Twitter, and they're like, "Oh, what's your address? We'll send you one of these shirts over." So yeah, I got a package from Sakura out in Japan with this shirt, and I was well chuffed with that.
That's bloody incredible. I love that, man. That is...
Yeah.
I thought the story would be something along those lines, because we hear about all these different engine modes, and you've got, I guess, with different teams as well. Some teams don't use numbers, right? That's obviously it's internal comms, right, to try and keep these things close to your chest, I guess.
Yeah, I think like the Mercedes use Strat as like their terminology.
Yeah.
But in essence, it's all the same thing. It's just turning the wick up.
Obviously, speaking of because of course you're now ex-Red Bull, used to work at the company, now outside of it. So we might be able to have a bit more of a candid conversation, because you're not in the in the business at the minute, because obviously going into these new regulations, and this is a huge opportunity for everyone, but obviously there's also a lot of pressure on a team like Red Bull who've been successful. Yes, you've only won, Mercedes have dominated, but Red Bull, you've always been up in there in the conversation for potential race wins, and throughout the turbo hybrid era. So maintaining those standards as well, there's a lot of pressure. Like from the people at the team, what's the feeling at the team at the minute, and are you quite glad you're out of that now, or do you kind of miss it because there is this big change going on?
Yeah, like I thought over Christmas, when I sort of first officially left, there was like this period where I just thought I really couldn't give a toss about F1 anymore. But then as like we had the Barcelona test and now the Bahrain test, I am sort of coming back into it as a spectator. But, I think in terms of where they're at, I mean, even if they're not at the front at the beginning, Red Bull, we've always had that reputation of being like in-season development. We just catch up throughout the year with in-season development. So even if it is a slow start, there's every chance we can get right back up there. But like you say, it's a new regulation, so I don't think anyone really knows where anyone is at the minute.
And especially like, obviously now, even with testing, because we don't know fuel loads, and I kind of asked this question on Twitter yesterday. I was like, it's almost the unknown. It's nice having that unknown, because then it gives more kind of conversation topics and teams keeping stuff close to their chest. I mean, the Mercedes weren't looking that quick yesterday. And we're filming this on day 2 of testing. But they've got good mileage in. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many different facets to it. Like, I feel like when I was chatting I had Mike Caulfield on, who's kind of ex-Haas, and talking about the kind of, there's not so much excitement, at least he felt, from the Haas team. It's like, it's more kind of nervous anxiousness going into it.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's kind of the same at Red Bull, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And like you say, in terms of Mercedes yesterday, I think because of that brand new package they've got, the majority of their day yesterday would have just been spent getting a baseline, not worrying about times, just getting the laps in, doing their aero runs to see, is it working as expected. And no, even when you're in the team itself, it's really hard to guess what other teams' fuel loads are. There's some obvious signs where if it's bottoming out a lot, things like that. But even the teams, they play tricks. They'll open their DRS late, they'll shut it early, they'll let off as they cross the line. It's all gamesmanship. So yeah, like I say, mate, until Q3, I don't think anyone's really going to know.
Yeah, well, because that's the thing, that there's things that the teams like exactly like that, where the teams can control and have an idea. Okay, if we open the DRS a second later, then we know that makes this much of a difference to lap time, but no one else will know. So yeah, we can still keep them cards close. And you know what? I like that. I like that gamesmanship side of it. I think that's a big part of F1. I think it always has been, and because it is as much a technical team sport as it is an individual driver sport. And I think that gets lost a lot of the time. I think that gets forgotten. It's a huge. I mean, how many people working at Red Bull?
Oh man, like we're talking, it's got to be 1,000, if not over now.
Yeah, and that's just, like with the budget cap as well.
Yeah. So obviously we had to lose some staff, which is unfortunate. But then with Red Bull powertrains, the PU side of it doesn't come under cost cap.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to repurpose some people over into powertrains and things like that. But even the PU side of it is going to get cost capped soon, apparently. I don't know if that's official, but that's what I heard.
Wouldn't be surprised. But anyways, to anyone who's obviously listening, watching, and Engine 11 position 5 might not ring any bells. You might not know the actual
who the hell is this guy?
Twitter god that is Engine 11 position 5. Well, first of all, Dan, as to your most recent position at Red Bull, what was your involvement in the team? What was your responsibility? What kind of job did you do at Red Bull Racing?
Yeah, so I was there for 6 years, and that entire time was spent as a senior systems engineer. Now, that's a fancy way of saying like glorified IT.
Nice.
F1 loves their job titles. And then what that boils down to is that any of the systems that connect back to the factory from the track, from the wind tunnel to the factory, simulators, anything that produces data, I was responsible for making sure that data got to the correct place, essentially. So, I don't know too much about mechanical engineering or aero, but I have a very high sort of top-down view of the business and how everything worked.
Amazing. And I know there's been a lot of kind of, teams talk about their partnerships with their technical partnerships in terms of cybersecurity and safety. I know like McLaren is like Dark Trace. Obviously with Red Bull, I know you've got like the Siemens. I'm not sure how big are those, because we think of sponsors a lot of the time as just being, they're just advertising a product, slap it on the side, bosh. But with them more technical sponsorships, like, did you have a real relationship? So obviously Oracle coming in, I know they work a lot with cloud and IT and that. So is that more of a genuine partnership than just a sponsor slapped on the side?
Yeah. So, you had, like you say, there's some sponsors that are effectively like cash only, where, like you say, they're just paying to have their sticker on the car. And then the technical partners are the ones that will work alongside you. And every contract's different. There'll be some money involved, but the main aim is to see what that company can do for your F1 team as like a success story. So like the major one at the moment, like you say, is Oracle, and that is all based around what their sort of cloud can do in terms of moving all the on-site compute off-site into the cloud. And then before it was Oracle, it was AT&T. They were like a
Yep.
large technical partner with us, and that was all based around like the connectivity between the track and the factory. You know, we had like the largest pipe between the factory and the track compared to all the other teams, which we could only do because of AT&T. So yeah, you know, there is benefits to that.
Yeah, because I mean, it's one of them things that it's actually fascinating how much F1 teams do create and produce and do in house. Like it boggles the mind how much is actually produced by hand. Yet, obviously, you can't do everything in house, so you're going to need to extend out. And obviously, the need for your job, and over that 6 years, obviously, you know, there's so so it would have been 2016 you started
Yes, yeah,
2016.
yeah,
I mean, even in between then and now, like it feels like, you know, technology has come on so far. Like, how has
yeah,
your job changed over that, or how did your job change over that kind of time period?
yeah, yeah. So I'll go back to the beginning where you said I started in 2016. I remember my job interview was on the weekend of the Japanese Grand Prix in 2015 when Kvyat rolled his car in qualifying,
Yeah,
because I remember walking past all the smashed bodywork from it during my interview. So
that's pretty cool.
that's how I remember
That's
that.
pretty cool.
And yeah, so like technology development is like, it's one of those things where you can give an F1 team as much processing power and technology as possible, but they'll always find a way to max it out.
Mm.
So, you know, the majority of innovation and things like that comes around the CFD and like the high performance computing. You know, in 2016, we'd have a rack, like 16 racks or something of kit, which, you know, now in 2022, it would be condensed down to 4.
Mm.
And, you know, eventually maybe they'll move it to the cloud. So, yeah, I mean, it improves, but it also doesn't in a way, because we'll always ask for 100% of anything we get.
Yeah. Well, because there's a lot of talk of obviously cost cap, you know, restricting CFD aero time. You know, do you think that the IT that this the side that you come from
Yeah.
is has there been a concerted effort from the FIA to kind of try and manage and police that as well, or is that kind of a bit more free reign? Would you say?
Yeah, no, that's a bit more free reign. The only, like you say, constraints we have to follow is budgetary. Really,
Mm,
there's no cap on what technologies we use. As long as we fall under that budget cap, we can do whatever we want and use whatever we want. And with the HPC and the CFD, the FIA do measure that in
hmm.
terms of like wind hours on, they call it, and then they just sort of audit all of that to make sure that no one's falling foul of any of the limitations.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. Do you feel like as time goes on, maybe they will? Because obviously, you know, a cost cap, and ultimately, you know, yes, that is going to affect every fundamental aspect of the business, and in like put more pressure on the teams to be as efficient as possible. But do you think that would be? Do you feel like the FIA would potentially get there? Because you know, Red Bull's obviously a huge team, one of the biggest teams on the F1 grid. So the ability and the resource that you had to do your job compared to your equivalent a Haas, for
Yeah.
example, you know, was there a big discrepancy there? Do you think, or do you think they were able to deliver just as much as you could, and Mercedes could, and Ferrari could? You
Yeah, no. So for sure, for the smaller teams, they would be having to do more with less.
know.
And in terms of the budget cap, I think it is an answer to a problem, the
Mm-hmm.
disparity between the big and small teams. But I think really some of the small teams still can't actually spend as much as the cap allows.
I don't think Haas ever have, had they?
No,
Yeah.
so there is a cap, but it's not really doing what you want it to do or it should do. I think there should be me personally. I think there should be a review of the way the prize money is dealt, and like these Ferrari historic payments that just get like 200 million for turning up and things like that. I think the time for all that Bernie style prize
Yeah.
money is gone, and there should be more fairer distribution.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of those, isn't it? Once that deal's been brokered, it's very hard to then take that away from Ferrari. Ferrari,
Yeah,
like, nah, we've been here since the start, so we deserve it. Which, yeah, again, it's the balance, isn't it? It's competitive integrity in sport. I mean, look, you see it in any sport. Big football teams have more money
yeah,
to throw around. Compared to,
yeah,
but it's not also the be all and end all. You look at how well Force India have done with terrible budget over the years
yeah.
and racing. So it's one of them, isn't it? It's an element, and I think the cost cap does the job to an extent, and it'll be interesting to like. Do you think the cost cap and going into this year, the new regs, given your experience, do you think it will do the job it's been designed to do, and to what extent? Do you think it will do 100% of the job? Do you think it will do like 50% of the job, or not at all?
I don't think it will be 100% effective. I think because the way COVID came about, it gave the teams an extra year
True.
for these regulations.
True.
The bigger teams that were already operating at the cap can afford to, say, lose 10 people, 20 people to spend an extra year on it.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the smaller teams like your Haas and whatnot, we saw they had to sacrifice last year, to be where they are today.
Yeah.
So it's hard to judge that with the way this regulation's come about. I think maybe we'll see some sort of evening of the playing field as we go along. But, I think for this year, it will be big teams and little teams like it usually is.
Yeah, because I guess as well, like when the new rules were announced, it was 2019,
Yeah.
and I guess the teams would have known about it, before the official announcement at Cota. So, there was no cost cap then, so they can just we'll just put 100
Yeah.
million to the side. Ferrari could just do that. You know what I mean? to
Yeah.
invest early
Yeah.
doors, because as much as there is the
Yeah.
slide in development scale, like that did give Haas more time, did give Alfa Romeo more time. Also, there's a reason their cars aren't anywhere near as complicated as the Red Bull, as the Mercedes, as the Ferrari. But like, were you surprised by how? Because the Red Bull concept, when you think of the big three teams, or let's include McLaren in this as well. Actually, big four teams, because I think all four cars fundamentally look so different. And
Yeah.
the Red Bull philosophy, the Mercedes, the Ferrari, like, were you quite surprised that
Yeah.
they look so different?
Yeah. I mean, I was even surprised at how different the Red Bull looked, because when I went on to my notice period at the end of November, I have to, the way it works in F1 is you put on gardening leave, so you can't, take your secrets elsewhere and things like that. But the model of the car that I saw in December looks nothing like the one that we saw revealed in Barcelona. So, that's how quick it can change. But yeah, no, I love the fact we got this much difference between the cars, and honestly, I couldn't even tell you who I think's got it right, to be honest. I like the Ferrari. I do think,
It's a beautiful
their
thing.
side pods. Yeah, I like the side pods on that. I think, what limited aero I do know, it ticks the boxes.
Yeah.
The Mercedes no pods, I think it's going to be a bit of a flash in the pan, to be honest. From the people I've spoke with, it looks impressive, but in terms of the actual airflow and heat management of the engine, they might have shot themselves in the foot with that, but maybe not. We'll see.
Well, I know that I think Mattia Binotto was quoted saying that he was asked about the Mercedes, and he said, like, we kind of went down that route and decided against it early doors, so we're not worried. Who knows? And the thing is as well, there's a lot of talk of over time, all the designs will converge. But I guess what would be ideal is that you can have a Ferrari or even like look at the Aston Martin. What I find fascinating: the Aston Martin and the Mercedes are running the exact same engine, yet their
Yeah,
side pods could not be more different. They are literally polar opposites. Like, do you think, given your the knowledge that you have of kind of aero and car development, like, do you think there could potentially be a space where you have got two, maybe three fundamental designs that could, one design, kind of like high rake versus low rake, right? Red Bull
yeah.
stuck with that, Mercedes stuck with low rake, and both designs worked. So, do you think there's room for that in terms of this external aero?
Yeah, I think I don't think there's the wiggle room to allow, let's say, like three clear different designs. I think if me and you have this conversation in 3 years' time, we'll probably be looking at cars that all look very similar.
Mm.
Because
Which
that's
is a
just
shame, but that's the way it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But there'll be different philosophies in terms of the front wing and things like that. But in terms of side pods and that, I think they probably all will converge eventually to a
Mm.
similar design. But yeah, we'll see.
And I guess you've got different drivers' styles as well that might feel a bit more because you always felt like, drivers like Max, drivers like Fernando, they like a kind of sharp kind of front end,
Yeah,
which probably suited the high rake design more than the more kind of longer but a bit more planted but then a bit less turny in for the Mercedes. So maybe that'll be a factor in it as well because obviously, Max Verstappen tied down long term to Red Bull. Um,
yeah,
yeah, what's your kind of like having, would you work with Max often on, I guess kind of, I can't imagine how your position would cross over with his,
yeah.
but your
Like what
experience
sort
with
of?
Max, like, was there much over your, because I mean, you were there for as long as he was, or it has been,
Yeah,
pretty much.
yeah, yeah. So like,
Dream
I
team, right?
don't. Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. He won't win now. I've left. Um,
Good man. Know your
but
worth.
in terms of interaction and things like that, it's in a professional capacity, minimal.
Mm,
But socially, behind the scenes and things like that, we've had chats, we've had sit downs, things like that. You know, and Max is like that. He wants to get to know everyone, no matter who you are, whether you work with him directly or not. He'll take the time to say hello. All the drivers do.
mm.
The best driver for that was Gasly. He'd make a point of going around shaking everyone's hand and sort of asking how you were and who you were and things like that. Albon was good as well. I know you're a big fan of him,
It's no
but
secret.
yeah, I know. Like you see all the drivers and things like that. They get these private jets everywhere. Whereas, Albon would be quite happy to slum it with you in economy and sit with the boys and things like that, which it's a real nice touch.
Mm,
It makes you feel like you're all part of one team.
mm.
But so yeah, they all make the effort. They're all good.
Yeah. And that's the kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's been such a tumultuous time in terms of it's funny how Red Bull have been able to maintain top level results throughout this, mainly through Max, let's be honest.
Yeah,
And since Ricardo left, there's been no real, because Ricardo would beat Max on pace on his day, and Max, would typically come out on top. But since Daniel left, there hasn't been that driver. Ricardo left end of 2016, didn't he?
2016 was the bodged Monaco, I think,
Yeah,
which he then got his redemption in 2017.
yeah.
But then 2017 was a bit of a crap year for him because he had loads of DNFs, didn't he?
Oh god, yeah, that was because the engine kept going, and he had like
Yeah, yeah.
about I don't know. He had. I think he had about 5 more technical DNFs than Max. He got
Yeah,
super.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, and all the conspiracies sort of came out like, oh, he's
Yes.
sabotaging Dan. It's like, no, he's just broken every mirror he's walked past. It seems.
Well, because again, like, do you remember at the time? Because again, that was also, wasn't it the first year of Drive to Survive? Today's Drive to Survive day.
Yeah,
So, and that was obviously that was a pretty dominant kind of plot line throughout
Yeah,
the fact that they came together at Azerbaijan, and the fact that Daniel was, so out of luck. And, from a team point of view, when you see your two drivers, because the way I see it is like you've got, again, 1,000+ people working on this car, and then these two drivers who can't park their egos, driving like idiots, crash into each other. Like, they were both culpable for that, as far as I'm concerned, and they let the team down. And I think they felt that afterwards. And I'm sure, like,
yeah.
did you feel, as obviously you understand that these are competitors and they both want to, these are top tier athletes at what they do, but at the same time, what was the feeling around the team after that? Was there a lot of anger towards the drivers, or was there a bit more understanding?
I think, in the races leading up to Baku that year, I think there was a feeling within the team that this was going to happen at some point. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know anything about management or driver management, but I feel like perhaps maybe someone should have had a chat with them before and just said, chill out. I mean, you saw it when Adrian stormed off the pit wall. It's because he spent the entire race on the radio telling them to, chill out.
yeah,
And that happens. So, at first I think I almost, pushed or should I say smashed the remote through my television set when it happened. And I
fair.
think that was
I
pretty
feel
much
that.
everyone in the
Yeah,
team. But a couple of weeks after, you just see the funny side of it, really.
you got.
Because you
Yeah,
got to laugh about it. They both came in the factory, they both addressed everyone and sort of apologised and whatnot. And then my favourite part was someone actually printed off the iconic photo of them like crashing at Baku and got them both to sign it, which I thought was quite amusing. But that's just the sort of humour you got to have about it.
mm.
So it was one of those things where you probably saw it come in. A bit like changing the subject slightly, a bit like the whole Max and Lewis at Silverstone.
Hmm.
I don't think there's anyone that was surprised that happened.
No,
It was going to
no, no,
happen
no,
at
no,
some
no. That was
point.
a matter of time, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just one of them things. But yeah, like you say, no one's really been able to fill that second seat and push Max as
Mm.
hard as Danny did. And I think that's not it's not slander on any of those drivers. It's
But
just
it's factually true. Like,
yeah,
it just is what it is, and
yeah,
obviously the reasoning, like there's so many factors that can dictate the reason. But before we get on to that, I just ask as well, in terms of the Ricardo Verstappen thing at that time, did it divide the team at all? Like, did you have certain mechanics and certain people who were more on one side and the other? Like, did it start to was there any division there, or was it a collective kind of
No, I think we
perception?
we were all unified in calling them both twats. So
Right, I know. Right, I
yeah,
know. That's the way.
and they would say it as well. The
Yeah,
pair
but
of them.
I feel like Max and Daniel they are, of the whole grid, I feel like they are two of the most real drivers. I feel like
Mm,
they both are unapologetically themselves, and
yeah,
they don't, like Daniel's, their characters are very different, like it seemingly, and I'm sure behind the scenes they're very different at times as well. And I guess Max is a bit more, has to hold in a little bit more, but he still speaks his mind, and I respect that. That's what I always really respected about Kimi Räikkönen, the fact that, okay, yes, he'd be a bit rude and he'd be a bit, but you know what,
Kimmy's
like,
Kimmy.
he's being himself, and I think that's, and obviously you've had all these other drivers then come in after Daniel. Um, I mean, look, for me, it's a combination of Max being just. I mean, the kid doesn't jump in after what he only raced in F3, didn't even, well, whatever. I think GP3, was it F3? I can't even remember. Just jumped straight in to F1 and just, fantastic in the Toro Rosso, outperforms Carlos Sainz his first season. Obviously got fortuitous in Barcelona with the Hamilton-Rosberg collision, but he won the race and
Yep.
like, there's that factor. There is also for me, and it seems pretty. That car is, it's a twitchy car. It's to his style, and it's a lot for any driver to come in. We've seen, as much as Perez did a better job than Albon and Gasly, he was still nowhere near. Like, you look at the qualifying
Yeah,
head-to-heads, you look at the race pace, still like, okay, yes, compared to Albon and Gasly, who was closer, but that's not saying much. And I'm the first person
yeah.
to say that. So for you, and you know, from your understanding, what balance do you think that was between those two factors? And was it a bit frustrating in the team to be like all these conspiracy theories about, oh, they only care about Max? Because I don't think that's true. Like, not at all. Like
No,
Max
it's
doesn't
not.
win the championship last year without Sergio.
Yeah, exactly.
Facts.
And you get all these conspiracy theories of, oh, Perez is getting all the second-hand parts and things like that, which is true to some degree. Perez's car was like a race behind in terms of parts,
Mm,
but that's just because of how hard they were pushing last year in bringing
mm.
upgrades. You can't, you know, continuously bring upgrades to both cars.
No.
Just the way manufacturing works, it doesn't work like that.
And if you've got upgrades, which car are you going to put it on? The one
The
that's going for
leader,
the championship, obviously.
yeah, yeah. So, people don't really understand that, which is, it's fine, whatever. But in terms of like the other drivers and that, I think Max's strength is being able to extract 100% out of a car that is a handful,
Yeah.
effectively. I think, Gasly's problems were, again, it's not slander on him, but I think he just lost his head a little bit
Yeah.
after, he crashed in testing and things like that. He just lost his confidence.
Yeah.
And once that happens, it's very difficult to come back from that.
Well, because Pierre, like we've seen it at times. Pierre's like, you don't see it typically, but he's got a temper on him. Like, you've seen that come out a few times, and I feel like the frustration of what was going on, because he knew how big of an opportunity he was getting, and the fact that because he was being directly compared to Daniel, who had continuously pushed Max close. That must have been really difficult for him.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I say, I think he just lost his head a little bit. And like I say, when that happens, you just doubt yourself and things like that. Alex, I think, yeah, probably it's a bit of a similar story, to be honest. Perhaps, you could argue that he was put in there too soon, and things like
For
that.
sure. Well,
Whereas,
it's almost like it. The worst thing that happened to Alex was Pierre not succeeding, because then Alex would have got more time at Toro Rosso probably to
yeah,
develop. You know what I mean? Like, you will never know, of course, but you could definitely make the argument.
yeah, yeah. And then Perez, he's a journeyman. He's been around for 10 seasons or whatever it is. So at least he's got that more experience with different cars and things like that. So I think he's adapted better because of his experience.
For sure.
But like you say, he's still, it was worlds apart between the two. I let him off purely because it's his first season in the team, and we'll see how he does this year. But I think, I think he has to do well this year or be a lot closer to Max. Otherwise, I think he's in danger of disappearing.
Yeah, I feel like there's, with these new cars, Max hasn't got this platform that he knows and, has been catered to a style that suits him really well. I expect Sergio to be a lot closer, because, I mean, look, Sergio was like most people's driver of the season in 2020. Is people forget that so quickly. And like Daniel Ricciardo, phenomenal in 2020, has a bit of a dodgy first year at McLaren, and
Yeah,
it's like, oh, he's washed. It's like, come on, really?
mid.
Mid, absolute mid. But that's the thing, and it's kind of like, I remember listening to Bottas talking after he left Mercedes about how, and this is in a Mercedes, which I think everyone can agree is, at least it was, that previous iteration, that turbo hybrid Mercedes was, with the longer wheelbase, less rake. It was seemed to be a more planted car, a more predictable car. The fact that George could jump in and secure and do such a good job in his first outing, I think, said a lot for the drivability of that car.
Mm.
And he said that he would the problem that Valtteri had is that Lewis was just always at 99.9% minimum, and to match those levels. And I think Max is doing the same. I think these two drivers are on a different planet to everyone else, to be honest, because they are just able to extract that level of performance, so
Yeah,
consistently.
yeah. I think like Bottas gets a tough, rep for his time at Mercedes. But if you look at it this way, they won constructors 100% of the time Bottas was there. And he's definitely played a part in that.
For sure, of course.
He's had his moments in racecraft where he's left the door open and things like that.
Yeah.
But you look at the stats, and I think it's something silly, like he's never been out of Q3 or something. He's always made Q3 while he was in a Mercedes, which is exactly what you want, And yeah, I spent 6 years at Red Bull, but I'm perfectly capable of saying Lewis is easily one of the best, if not the best, and anyone you put next to him is going to look mid.
Talking of that, obviously George now this year. What do you think? Do you think George, because George is obviously incredibly impressive F2 career, like beat who was next to him consistently at Williams? You could argue, what level was Kubica at? Obviously, after his accident,
Yeah,
you can't expect him to be at the same level he used to be. Don't get me wrong, like prime Kubica, it's an absolute travesty that he wasn't able to fight for the championships. I feel like he had the talent to. Latifi obviously comes in with a lot of backing, didn't have the most impressive junior career. It's hard to judge George. We've only really got Sakir, and even then you look at, I honestly think actually what was the most impressive, what really shows George's pedigree, the fact that he put it P2 ahead of Lewis at Spa, because rain is the great equaliser, they say. But what do you think? Do you think George has got the minerals?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say because, again, no slander, but George's teammates haven't exactly been a great benchmark, really.
No, of course not.
So, to be honest, I don't think we're really going to get an answer to that until they start racing this year. I think it's too much to ask for him to beat Lewis. But if he's qualifying one position behind him or picking up the pieces when Lewis has an off day, then he's doing everything he should be doing. And, Lewis, all respect to him, but I don't think he's got that long left in him.
Oh, no, of course not.
I think if he won the 8th last year, I don't think he'd have bothered coming back.
I'm inclined to agree. I think that he might have wrapped it, but I think he'll have the bit between his teeth this year for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And, George has just got to settle in but not disturb, make it another Nico and Lewis thing.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure if he would, but if he keeps his, head down and nose clean, then...
The thing is that driver dynamic, I feel like it's almost, in terms of the driver relationship, I think it is more kind of advantage Red Bull because, Perez knows his... I know he said he wants to win a world championship, but given the contract
there.
Yeah, of course. Given the contract, that Max has got, how young he is, Max is very much the present and the future of that team. Whereas Mercedes, they've got that difficult transition, haven't they? Because they obviously want Lewis to get 8 world titles. I'd love to see that. But, George is their future. Lewis is 36, almost 37 now, I think.
He's older than me and I'm 33, so...
That's it. So it's like, like you say, he hasn't got forever, and Mercedes have to kind of manage that transition. That end up being a bit of an issue for the team?
Yeah,
I feel like George will play the team game and support. I think George will do what he can to support Lewis getting 8, and then knowing that then Lewis will probably retire once he gets 8. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And like you say, the transition. Look how it went with Vettel and Charles. Are you going to see another one of them? I don't know. I don't think
Vettel,
so.
Ricardo at Red Bull as well.
Well,
before he joins as well.
Yeah, but I think George has got a lot of respect for Lewis, and
yeah, definitely.
But when they, stick the visors down, no one cares. All that goes out the window. So we'll see. But yeah,
absolutely. Are you excited for it?
For what, George versus Lewis,
Just the season.
or
You
just
know,
the season?
now that you're out of the like, do you feel differently going into the season about the sport? I guess.
Yeah, I think. How's the best to sort of sum it up? I can understand everyone's anger and frustration with the way last season ended. You know, it's great to sit here and say I was part of a winning championship, but also I'm not naive enough to say, that was 100% on merit. I think, there was definitely some luck in the way that all played out.
Of
And I can
course.
understand why a lot of people are frustrated with it. I think I can be more critical of it now in terms of the entire
Yeah.
sort of FIA and things like that, without without my sort of rose tinted glasses on. So yeah, I am excited. I'm excited because, like we said earlier, the cars all look very different, and I'll be interested to see who's made a winner and who's dropped the ball. And I am interested to see the dynamic between George and Lewis play out, and also Charles and Carlos, because where they finished so close last season, I think if we have another season of them being close again, I wonder if we start to see some cracks in that relationship and typical Ferrari drama happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think Carlos outperformed a lot of people's expectations, including Ferraris,
Yeah, yeah, I'll agree with that.
personally. But also, obviously, given you're working at Red Bull, AlphaTauri, Toro Rosso, you know what's the perception internally at Red Bull of that team? Is that team seen as an extension? Is it seen as just another team? Like, what's the kind of relationship there? I guess more kind of culturally, not as much like, oh, we give them these parts, but what's the feeling? Are they like, oh, they're your second team, they're like the local team, your main team's Red Bull, but they're like the local team that you always look at their results and like, well done.
Yeah, to be honest, we just treat them as another team because they're based in Faenza in Italy, so it's not as if we're even down the road from them, or if we see
It's interesting.
them that often or anything like that.
Yeah.
In terms of the drivers, we always look at that as like the junior team. So any driver that's in an AlphaTauri, if they do well, we expect them to be in a Red Bull at some point.
Yeah.
And the AlphaTauri guys do use our simulator, so you do see some of their drivers in the office now and again.
Boo.
Yeah,
Throw stuff at them.
yeah,
Fuck off, Daniel Kvyat.
yeah. Get out. But nah, they're all good. They're all good. It's essentially it is all still Red Bull at the end of the day, isn't it? So you don't look at them as a competitor as such. You just sort of think of them like a B team. And that's not to diminish them. They do solid work, and Gasly won Monza on merit. So
Great day.
yeah, no, it was good. I was happy for him, really happy for him. Even like as a Red Bull employee, we all were. If you watch the replays of it, you'll see all of our guys come out of the garage and clapping all of
Yeah.
them lot as they run down. Because nobody looks at Albon and Gasly in like a negative way. You want to see him succeed. It's just a shame it didn't work out with
Yeah.
you.
I could feel that, particularly obviously 2020, I could feel that you really like there was a collective from everyone, from Christian down to the mechanics, that everyone really wanted Alex to do better. And that was obviously that was a tough season for me as a fan,
Yeah,
but obviously a tough season for you guys as well, like within the team, because you've got obviously the hires of Max starting to mount seemingly a title challenge that would obviously become a proper title challenge in 2021, but also the other half of the garage, you know, seeing that discrepancy in results must have been difficult. Like, what do you think? I've asked this question to before, and I'm just like, the fact that Gasly, Albon, Perez have all gone in that seat and like been similarly far away from Max. Do you think anyone else could have done it and done a significantly better job?
I think if we put Daniel back in the car, I think last year we'd have won the constructors.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of other drivers, it's like almost all the drivers we've had already. So like Vettel, I think probably could have done a good job in it. Carlos Sainz, Charles, but I can't see Max and Charles ever, working together in that way. I think they're both want to be that sort of number one, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
No, see, I just don't know, and I don't know. Even like being in the position I was in, it's even difficult for me to tell if it's a credit to Max. Like, you can't overdrive a car, but to consistently get what he gets out of it, is that a compliment to him?
Yeah.
Or is it like a negative on the other drivers that can't get as close to him, if you know what I mean?
I mean, you look at the lap he almost put together in Saudi Arabia, and that's just like the finest of margins, and having the confidence to push a difficult car so close to the edge. I think that perfectly encapsulated where it was so good, and then just slightly overextends at the end because the car is just this. Yeah, but you need that driver with the confidence to really, really, really push it. And I think Max was always that. And the others couldn't hold a candle to him.
Yeah, maybe Max is just, I don't know, more fearless, as it were. Devil be damned, he'll just chuck it in. Whereas the others may be a little bit more hesitant as such. I don't know. But yeah, that lap, I was, again, fuming. I upset all my neighbours because I just went out into the garden and just started shouting swear words into the air. And my wife was like, "You do know we've got to live around these people?" I was like, "Yeah, sorry."
Did you ever have like watch parties at the office?
Not at the office as such, but I did some of the events in the ops room back in Milton Keynes. So essentially, the ops room is just basically like a giant auditorium with a big screen. Everyone's there to work, but it's a bit more chilled out, as it were, because obviously there's no cameras on you and things like that.
Yeah.
I was in there when Lewis's engine failed in Malaysia, and I don't think there was too many tears shed when that happened. So yeah, that was quite amusing when that happened.
Of joy, tears of joy.
Yeah. But no real watch parties or anything like that. It's a bit weird, really, because when you work there sort of 5 days a week, you do have them moments where the last thing you want to do at your weekend is watch F1.
Makes sense.
And I think, that was one of the biggest things, I think, for me, was before I started there, I was a huge fan of F1. I wouldn't miss it. I'd watch all the practices, all the qualifying. But, a few years after working there, if I missed a race, I didn't really care. I wouldn't even watch the highlights. I wasn't that really bothered,
Yeah.
So I'm hoping
I
go back to actually wanting to watch it, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. That must be quite nice now, because you've not got that, it isn't work. You know what I mean? You don't feel like, I'm still working technically because I'm watching the race,
Yeah. It's going to be difficult watching it without having a telemetry screen in front of me. Because after 6 years of watching it, I didn't actually watch the world feed or the pictures. I used to follow the race through the telemetry because you just learn to do that.
Yeah,
and
course.
You get so much more info out of it. Now I can't do that, so it's a bit of a shock. Like, all with the testing and that, I can't see sector times and things like that.
Yeah,
and it's winding me up a little bit. But yeah,
got to find a way to siphon that feed directly to your home so that you can watch it.
Yeah, well, there's apparently you can pull quite a lot of information out of the F1 Live app. So I'm going to start looking into that, and if something comes of that, I will.
Yeah, I think with F1 TV, there's quite a bit there, because I used to use F1 TV with a VPN to watch the race much cheaper. Don't tell anyone.
No, I won't.
I can't anymore, because they're like,
you can't even FIA.
Cancel this YouTube. You can't even. I don't know how they've done it, but like, you can't even watch the F1 YouTube channel if you've got VPN turned on. it's like the only channel on YouTube of any channel. I don't know. They've somehow managed to circumvent it. So fair play to them. We touched on this actually. So you're big F1 fan, goes to work at F1 team, then obviously F1 becomes work kind of joy. Your skill set that you'd obviously established before F1 or before Red Bull got you the opportunity at Red Bull. So where were you before you joined Red Bull? Were you working in any kind of motorsport capacity, or were you out of that
Yeah.
completely?
So this is a great story because almost daily I get someone DM me on Twitter saying, "Oh, I'm doing something at university. What's the best way to get in F1?" And I always have to turn around and say, "I don't know," because I didn't do university. I dropped out of college. You know, my first job was literally stacking shelves at Sainsbury's. You know, so I ended up doing like an evening class in like IT basically at my local college, which then turned into working for PC World. Big up PC World when
Big
that was
up.
still a thing.
Curry's PC World now. Or not even PC. No, they've dropped PC World completely,
Is it?
haven't
I
they,
don't
from the
even know
name?
what it is now.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
literally just Curry's now.
back when it was
Rip.
Dixon's or whatever, Dixon's store group. So there you
Throwback.
go.
Throwback.
My little boomer moment there. Sorry everyone. And yeah, so I ended up getting like my first IT job, and then I ended up getting a job as like a junior level at an investment bank in London, supporting all of the systems that run the pricing data and link all the banks together so they can do all their moody deals and things like that. And then I was sitting at my desk one day in 2015, and I was really disillusioned with working in London because of the commute and things like that,
Yeah.
you know. And I just got a withheld number calling my phone, and I hate answering withheld numbers, but for whatever reason, this time I did, and it was someone basically saying, "Red Bull F1 team have got a job. You know, we've looked at your CV. We think you'd be a good fit. Do you want to come for an interview?"
So is this a call from a recruitment company that were working
Yeah,
on behalf
yeah.
of Red Bull? Okay, yeah.
Well, yeah, they were working on behalf of Red Bull. So, you know, like I say, at the time, I was an F1 fan, so of course I was like, yeah, let's go for it. And did the interview and obviously got the job. Now, I think, well,
Amazing.
I know because this is what they've told me, is that the translation of the pressure from working in an investment bank actually goes quite well with F1 because it's kind of like the same thing, you know, it's all mission
Right.
critical, it's all,
Interesting.
you can't, you know, afford any downtime, things like that.
Yeah.
So I say my road to F1 was luck, you know, to walk straight into a Red Bull and not have to start in any sort of junior categories of motorsport, anything like that. And, you know, it's difficult when I turn around to people and say, you're not going to have the same route in as I did, because it was, you know, it's extremely rare and unheard of. And it's not because, you know, think I'm better than everyone else. It's just I'm aware of how lucky and privileged I was to get in the way I did. So yeah, when people sort of say to me, "Oh, how do I get into F1?" I say I'm the worst person to ask that question to because you know, it was pure luck more than anything.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing, because luck, when you think of luck, like anything, it's a combination of opportunity and have you seizing that opportunity. You know, that you could have just never called
Yeah,
that. You could have been like, well, I've never worked in F1, so I'm not. Why would they want me? You know, you could have had that self doubt and not gone for it and not be where you are today. So,
the worst
yeah,
thing they can
there's
say, the worst thing they can say is no. That's the way you got
precisely.
to look at it.
Precisely, because I think, like, and again, like when I went to college, I did motorsport engineering. Like my that was the plan for me to. I wanted to work for a race team. I quickly worked out that the hands-on stuff really wasn't for me. It was more the kind of design, the theory, and but I ended up, it was more design that I loved, and then I kind of went down that route. But I think there is a perception, and I certainly felt that from my course mates and people I kind of know who've got ambitions to work in motorsport, is that when you think about working in motorsport, you think you think mechanic, aerodynamicist. That's pretty much it. And it's like there's so many. There's caterers, there's receptionists,
Yeah,
there's IT. What you worked in. There's so many different facets, and obviously,
yeah,
like you say, you're the transferable skills that you'd accrued working, up the city.
yeah,
That's obviously, that's perfectly, you know, corroborated over to Red Bull and
yeah,
got the job that you did.
yeah. And I think if there's anyone listening that does want some advice, I think the only meaningful advice I can give really is to follow the teams on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
because they nearly all advertise their positions on there, and be realistic with your career choices. So you're not going to leave university and walk into an F1 team unless you do like an internship, and then even then, there's no guarantee of that. But if you could get yourself into like the aeronautics industry or something like that, then you find that can transfer quite well across over to
Mm,
F1 as well, and things like that.
definitely. But because that's the thing, I think some people, you can have. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you could your job could and the skills that you've developed, you could work in pretty much any industry because pretty much every industry requires or could potentially require some high level IT support functionality, whatever.
Yeah,
Now, obviously, if your desire is to work in Formula One, if you're an aerodynamicist, well, you kind of either going into like motor racing, you're going into actual like aircraft engineering,
yeah,
I don't know, whatever. But it just depends. Yeah, I guess it depends on what you're, because I used to work at a PR agency and up the city, and I was obviously working on the creative side, and one of the girls who worked as in on the kind of PR side of the business, she left and went to McLaren, and I think she's just left McLaren actually now. I didn't know her that well, but you know, the company I was working for, I was working on bloody Toblerone, doing social media for Toblerone and Cadbury and loads of like food brands, and now they've gone and worked to McLaren because those transferable skills and
yeah,
got the opportunity.
yeah, yeah. Like you say, it is very dependent on which part of the business you want to end up in. Like you say, PR and marketing and all that is, you can easily transfer that across again with IT, manufacturing. If you've
Mm-hmm.
done high end manufacturing, things like that. So it's really only like the aero and mechanical engineering is the one where it's more difficult to get
Specialized.
into. Yeah, specialized. Yeah. So but if I can do it, mate, anyone can do it.
Well, no, because I saw you tweet a while ago. I'm not sure if it was a little thread you put together talking about your experience. And I think that's super
Mm,
important because there is this kind of, there is 100% having been a college level motorsport engineering student myself, who one of the courses I applied to do was motorsport engineering at Brunel. I got rejected, but whatever. It's fine. Didn't need you anyway, Brunel. Fuck off. But yeah, I think it's important that there isn't, there isn't this one route. And yes, you might not be, might not have got onto this incredible, motor racing course wherever you are. But like, if you desire and want it and you follow, like you say, right people on LinkedIn. Also, I think following, because anytime someone who works in F1 pops up on Twitter, I follow them straight away just because I'm interested. But also on LinkedIn, like I think it's about like if you see someone, I'm sure some people will look at the job that you've done and been and the job that you did at Red Bull and be like, oh mate, I'd love to have that job. So
yeah,
you know, follow you on Twitter, follow you
yeah,
on LinkedIn, look at the career progression, and be like, okay, cool, that's how this one individual. But again, there's only so much you can control in life. Like you were able to control the things you did, you controlled working in the city, but then you getting that call, that
yeah.
was out of
I
your control.
I just decided to answer a withheld phone call.
Yeah,
That was
just
pretty much how
you're
it
feeling
started.
you're feeling lucky that day.
Yeah, obviously. So yeah, but I think it's also important to say to people out there, if anyone's listening that is struggling at school or college or university, that that doesn't automatically mean you're not going to get to where you want to go. Because I was terrible at school. It's just something about the environment that didn't fit with me. You know, I have got like 4 GCSEs and none of them are worth talking about. You know, I went to college for 6 months. Again, spent 3 of them at home slacking off because the environment just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
You know, but I found that what worked for me was the hands-on aspect of
Yeah.
actually sort of on the job progression in a way, you know, rather than sitting and reading books.
It's so sad because I hear this so often. It's like the school system rewards a certain type of intelligence. Like almost, have you got a good memory to recite in
Yeah,
exams? You know, academic intelligence. You know, entrepreneurship, creativity. There's a reason a lot of the richest people in the world who are like entrepreneurs and started up companies, are dropouts because
yeah,
it's like it depends on what, and it's almost like when kids, and it sounds like you felt that as well, like when you don't fit within that type of intelligence that is rewarded, you're like, oh well, you're getting a D, you're getting an F, you're getting a U,
yeah,
you're getting a fail, like you're and you're made to feel dumb, you're made to feel stupid, when actually no, it's like you're and clearly given like the job that you've had and the experience you've done working in a senior role at Red Bull Racing, like you fucking know what you're talking about, yet the school system, painted you out to be a failure, essentially,
yeah. So my GCSE history teacher, I'll always remember this moment. There was, I think I was like obviously misbehaving or whatever in class, like all teenagers do, and he just said to me like, Daniel, you're going to amount to nothing. So when I got my job at F1 in Red Bull Racing, I made sure to find him on LinkedIn and I followed him. And he never messaged me back, but I am that petty that I like to think he saw that.
Oh, I love those. When I had Katie on a few weeks ago from WTF1, she had a similar kind of story from when they tried to force her to go to university. She was like, no, and then she got a really good job, and then they were like, oh, come back and do a talk, and she was like, fuck off.
Yeah,
Mic drop. But it's like it's. I think there's so much responsibility, and like one of my best mates, Sam, he's a primary school teacher, and I think he really understands this responsibility of, and acknowledging, like it's a problem because the system is built to, teachers might not believe in the system that they're teaching, but they have to, that's their job. They have to give these certain
yeah,
exams and they have to grade them in a certain way. But yeah, because I just think that is so important to hear, because I think so many kids, and I think probably, a lot of kids I knew growing up, at the time they'd like play up and they'd always be the loud ones and never do the work. And you'd think at the time, oh, they just want attention. But a lot of it, I think, it's just out of that boredom and frustration
yeah,
that what
yeah,
they're
yeah.
doing doesn't stimulate them.
That's what it was with me. You know, it just didn't work for me, and that's okay. I think that is the message that gets missed, is that, like you say,
Yeah.
if it doesn't work for you, you're automatically going to be amount to nothing, which isn't true. You just, everyone learns in different ways. So
100%, man. I think that's like super important. And mate, credit to you for getting to where you have. And obviously, you get this amazing job at Red Bull, 6 years at the team, and then for some reason you decide, right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to set up a Twitter and I'm going to jump onto the most toxic platform in the most, I mean, when did you start was it start of 21 or end of 2020? I remember you first popping up on my feed just when
yeah,
things started to get the most toxic. You were like, yep, this is for me.
let's go. Yeah. So like the account I had since like 2017, but I didn't really use it. And then, I think I had like 300 followers or something at the end of 2020. And it was like I was being really petty, and I hold my hands up to that. To like some people that would sort of say, "Oh, Red Bull, the toxic working
Red
place," and all
Bull
things
shit.
like that. Yeah, yeah. And I'd always reply, "Well, I work there, and I think it's fine," sort of thing. And then it just sort of spiraled and sort of grew into this tongue-in-cheek sort of
Yeah.
not serious account.
Was there any particular tweet that first kind of stimulated the growth? Was there like a viral tweet, or did you just gradually grow?
I think the majority of it was like gradually growing. I'll admit, I think it was carried quite a lot by the fact that I worked in F1.
Yeah.
Nobody really cared what I had to say at the beginning. I just worked in F1. Let's follow this dude. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, cool, whatever. And then I put out a tweet it was last year, I think, and maybe around the summer break time, when we were discussing, all the media were discussing triple headers and things like that.
Yep.
And I saw like a lot of comments from people saying, oh, all they do is go for a weekend sort of thing. And I took quite a large issue with that because it's just A, not true, and B, I think does a disservice to all the guys that are traveling to every race. So I basically did like an itinerary of what your week would look like at an event in a thread. And it was like, depending on where you're going, you travel out Monday or Tuesday. Wednesday and Thursday are the setup days at the track where you're putting all the garage together and everything. And, that you could be trackside for 14 hours that day, both of those days. Friday, early start, obviously, because it's free practice. Again, could be a late night if, you've had a shunt or something. Saturday, Sunday, qualifying race, pack down immediately after the race, and you've got to be out of there by a certain time so they can hand it over back to the circuit. And, the guys that are doing this, like I say, have already been doing 12, 14-hour days since the Tuesday, and then Monday morning, they'll fly out home unless it's a triple header, and then they're flying straight to the next event. So, you got some guys that will be out of the country for a month, and it's easy to say, oh, that sounds great, traveling the world. And, it is. And
it's not really traveling the world in that sense, though, is it? It's not like a gap year where you got a fucking margarita every year.
No, you don't. There's hardly any opportunity to go out and see these places you're visiting. So Barcelona Winter Test, I've been 4 or 5 times now. Couldn't tell you anything about Barcelona apart from the airport.
It's a lovely city. You should go there one day properly.
Yeah, exactly. Because you don't get a chance to see it. All I can tell you is what's outside the taxi window or the minibus window to the track. And
it's just another circuit at the end of the day for the team, isn't it?
Yeah, you see all the same people. All the same teams, all the same staff. It is just like a different circuit. That's all it is. Different time zone
in another place.
Yeah. But if you're young, free, and single, I say, then it's great. It's wicked.
Yeah,
you can go out and
you can make work your life.
Yeah, I say to some of the boys that were young, free, and single out there, I said, "Have you completed Tinder yet?"
Listen. Why not?
But for people like me, who are married with 3 kids, being away for a month, it's not viable.
No.
Which is the reason why I chose to leave in the end. I was very fortunate in that my position, I didn't really have to travel that much. But still, I had a new son born in November, and I had my paternity at home for 2 weeks. And I just sort of got to the end of those 2 weeks, went back to work, and I thought, you know what, I'm done. 6 years in F1, I've got burnout. I don't feel like my heart is in it anymore.
Yeah.
And I could have been selfish in a way and said, I'll just stay here and collect the paycheck, But with that Twitter account and seeing those people DMing me like, oh, how can I get into F1, things like that, I just sort of thought, you know what, I'm not going to sit here and warm this seat up if my heart's not in it.
Yeah.
And, because if my heart's not in it, I'm not giving the best to the company, and I just thought, no, that's it, we'll leave. So I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't have another job lined up. I just thought, nah, let's get out of here. We're done.
Fin it off. Yeah, I mean, look, when I had Mike on, we talked about this at length as well, and the the difference in the perception of what teams do on the ground and the reality. And I think most fans understand that it's an intense job, but I was talking about, it feels like it's an industry where, and I don't know if this pressure is internal, but certainly externally, it's very much like, oh, well, it's a privilege to work in F1, so stop moaning. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Yeah.
that is such a dangerous, and I was saying to my, that exists in the fashion industry a lot as well, where it's like you got these young kids going to work at these big fashion houses, which are like huge, and then they're just paid minimum wage and they're expected to work 12-hour days every day when they're not paid for, and it's like they're almost exploited for that. I don't feel that's as much of a, because that's internal pressure. And I think as well, like there is obviously a degree of extent. If you say, "Oh, I work at ASOS or I work at Boohoo or I work at Topshop or whatever," there is that kind of clout, and there's the clout to working in F1, and I know you don't want to be seen to be ungrateful, but at the same time, like houses, like Mike was saying, like there's just an exodus. It feels like of people leaving because, and especially with the cost cap coming in, there seems to be more. The work still needs to get done. And yes, you were saying about Imola when there was the 2-day weekend. Like it's okay, cool, but then you're still just squeezing almost as much work into a short period of time. So it doesn't really solve the problem.
Yeah, and I think the reason as well, sort of picking up on those points there, is that you don't see too many people on social media working in F1 is because you do get a lot of stick and abuse just from random people, and not everyone can cope with that sort of thing. I got
absolutely.
I got 25,000 followers on Twitter, humble brag, and it's easy some days to sort of have a few of those people message me some shitty comment, and then I sort of the rest of my day is I'm down in the dumps. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people in F1 just don't bother with it because of the bullshit that comes with it.
Yeah.
Whereas I took it and thought, I'm just going to push back and sort of, tongue in cheek, take the piss out of everyone and call everyone mid on the grid, and then just sort of laugh as everyone argues in the comments. But yeah,
just set the fire and walk away.
yeah, pull the pin and walk off, sort of thing, So yeah, it's just a lot of people don't want that pressure, and people will find you on social media and find the most out of context tweet you've said, and then email it to HR or something ridiculous like that, and say, "Oh, look,
people
so and so
actually
said
do
yeah,
that." I'm like,
I've lost count the amount of times I've had that. It almost became a joke in itself in the end, where HR would just sort of say, "Oh, you got another one today," and I'm like, "Yep."
That is honestly, that is pathetic. So, and talking of the team, like, how did the team feel about? Because obviously there is you're an individual, put your opinions out there, but also you are, representing a organization much bigger than yourself. You see a lot of people in their Twitter bios, opinions are my own. Now, obviously, because you're working for a sports team, the conversation's even more polarizing because there's this big battle every weekend, especially in 2021. Like, how did did the team, were the team happy that you were on Twitter, or were they not?
Obviously, there's a set of rules you have to follow, and to be honest, that's pretty much the same in every industry. Everyone's got a social media policy these days, and there were very specific rules that were set by the F1 management that you also had to follow. So you weren't allowed to have F1 in your username or anything like that. So you couldn't represent, make out like you were representing F1.
Hence why I'm just Tomo now, not Tomo F1.
Oh, did you get like a shitty letter or something? Or?
Well, no, one Cranky Yankee, one of the other, he did, and then I read it and I was like, I mean, this wouldn't hold up in court, but I'm just going to take F1 out anyway because there's no other big Tomos on YouTube. So I was like, sweet, I'll have that.
Aggro, what I mean?
Exactly.
So yeah, obviously I couldn't go on there and say I couldn't for instance, what me and you having this chat now, I probably wouldn't be able to do that while I was still employed, because
Yeah.
it could be seen as that you're interviewing me and I'm representing the team, rather than me and you just two mates having a chat,
Yeah.
sort of thing, So there were lines that, you had to be careful of. And, sometimes I did cross them either accidentally or whatever, like
Whoops.
I think like my bio picture on Twitter for a little while was me in my uniform at the track with a headset on,
Yes,
and
it
then,
was. Yes, I
yeah,
remember
and
that
then
one.
they sort of got the ump a little bit. So like, well, people could look at this photo and think you're tweeting in an official capacity of the team, sort of thing. So it was the little things like that. And they sort of became very aware that as the account grew, more and more journalists started following me, which always makes me laugh, because if anyone follows me, you'll know all I do is tweet shit. So I don't really know why journalists feel the need to follow me. But then they sort of get nervous about that a little bit. They're like, all these journalists are following you. Just think before you
Yeah, I
tweet,
mean,
things like that.
because I get it. Like, say you say something that's kind of tongue in cheek, but then a journalist picks up on it, and like Red Bull employee claims blah blah blah. You can see the headline being written now, can't you?
Yeah, well, this did happen. So last
Oh
year
god,
I know, yes, it's brilliant. I think it was
I don't know about this.
Jeddah. I think it was, or whichever circuit it was, where Max and Bottas got in trouble because there was a yellow flag in qualifying and they didn't slow down enough or something.
I think that was Jeddah. Yeah,
It was it,
I
yeah.
think it
And
was.
there was like this humming and ahhing because it was a flag, yellow flag that was waved, but a light board was showing green.
Mm,
And, the argument was coming about of what takes precedence, a flag or a light board.
yes.
And so I tweeted as a joke a picture of the regulations, which said like, I think it was like a light board at night time takes precedence over a flag or something. And I just said, "Don't worry, lads. Here's my out. We're in the clear." But a journalist took that tweet, printed it, and I don't know who did this to this day. Took it out, printed it while they were in Jeddah, shoved it in Christian's face, and said, "Is this Red Bull's official stance on the matter?" Yeah,
Oh no!
and
Oh
it
no!
proper kicked off.
Oh shit!
Understandably, because if I was Christian, that happened to me, I'd be like, "What the fuck? Who is this guy?" Sort of thing. And yeah, I never found out who it was that did that, but and if they're listening, that was a real shitty thing to do.
What a dickhead! Oh
Yeah,
my god, that I'm cringing for you, man. That's crazy.
yeah,
That's definitely
yeah,
going in the intro of this podcast because that's for.
yeah, yeah. It was like, I was just like, what the fuck, and they didn't uh, they didn't see it negatively. They could. I think
No,
they were
it's one of
more.
them. It can be okay. It was tongue in cheek, whatever. Like Christian seems, as much as I'm not Christian's biggest fan, he seems like someone. He'd be like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Like he's not
Yeah,
too. I
yeah,
don't know what the term I'm looking for is, but like not too like not PC, but too like oh everything. I don't know.
yeah.
I
I
don't know
think
what I'm
he
trying to say.
was more pissed off that the way they went about it,
Yeah,
sort of shoving a bit of paper in his face and saying, "What's
was
your
trying to
official
get like a
comment?"
got your moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
you know what I mean. Yeah, so yeah, that was pretty shitty. But I don't know. That's just what, like I say, it's just what happens when you work in F1 and you're on social media. You get stupid shit like that happening.
how
So
have you? Because before you started, this incredible Twitter journey. Had you had any other prior experience of, putting your voice out there and having a lot of people listening? You know what I mean?
no, never, never. You know,
So how have you found? Because obviously, and it's like anything. It's like with what I do, which what 99% of content creators, in any way, wherever you're YouTube, Twitter, you're still making content, you're still putting yourself out there. It's no different. It's just I think that's why Twitter works for me because it's just an extension of YouTube because it's just the conversation.
yeah,
But how have you? 99% of the feedback is going to be great, but especially obviously being a Red Bull employee amongst the very, very polarized last season. Like on a personal level, how have you dealt with that? Because we all have our days when those comments get to us, but how have you managed through it, and
Yeah.
how are you doing now?
So I think, there was one point where I was really sort of low, to the point of where I was on antidepressants and everything, and sitting down with my wife talking about it. She was like, "This is pretty ridiculous that a Twitter account is making you feel like this, because it's affecting my home life, my family life, things like that."
Yeah,
And in the end, I sort of look at it as, I can't please everyone, and
you never
the
will.
people that matter most know who I really am. You know, so if someone takes a comment I say the wrong way, it is pointless arguing, because
Yeah,
people have already made their mind up.
yeah,
I've had people message me, "Oh, you work for Red Bull, you're a white supremacist," and it's just like, are you for real? You know what I mean? And things like that, and it's just ridiculous. And like I say, I can't please everyone. I know who I am. That's all that
yeah.
matters.
I think it's that acceptance that not everyone's going to interpret things in the way that you meant, and some people are more interested in telling you what you meant rather than understanding what you actually meant.
Or trying to
Because
tell me,
words are just 140 characters. That words are just a vessel for our feeling.
yeah,
One
yeah,
person says one word, and people interpret it in different ways. You know what I mean?
yeah, or people messaging me trying to tell me how my workplace is, even though I've been there for 6 years. It's like, I think I know, thank you, sort of thing. But at the same time, if people respond to me in a constructive criticism sort of way,
Of
I'm,
course.
I'm more than happy to sit and have that
Yeah.
conversation with them. But if you come out at me aggressively, then I'm just going to show my wife, and we're probably going to laugh at you and your message over dinner. You know what I mean? And everyone's going to look at your comment and think you're an idiot. But I'm sure you get stupid things as well. You
Of
know.
course. Of course.
So yeah,
No, and that's the thing. It's not, we're not sitting here saying like, oh, we don't like criticism. We don't like, that's not it. I think the best way of kind of putting it is that I'm more than happy to debate people on points and subjects that I believe in. What the most frustrating thing is when people, it's the being misunderstood thing that's the difficult. It's like someone will say to me like, you hate Lewis Hamilton, you hate Max Verstappen, you're anti-Max, you're Lewis biased. And I'm like, no, but if I was genuinely, then I could be like, yeah, well, I am, blah blah blah. But I'm not. So that I'm like, that's not what I am. So I can't. How can I have a conversation when you're telling me I believe something that I don't? And
yeah,
that's not
yeah,
a conversation. That is the biggest. I think that's the biggest thing with social media generally. Like I'm happy to, when I underrated Fernando Alonso and thought he was going to be trash when he came back into the sport and he smashed it. I'm happy. Like people can come at me for that, and I'm like, yes, come at me, and
yeah,
I will explain how I was wrong. I'm cool with that. But when it's something that doesn't happen or you don't believe in or isn't true, that's where it gets frustrating.
yeah, yeah. And people assume that just because I work for Red Bull, I hate Lewis, I hate Mercedes, sort of thing, which is hilarious, because if
It's
you
just so
actually,
one-dimensional, isn't it?
yeah, if you go to the paddock, you'll actually see Mercedes engineers and Red Bull engineers having a chat like they're old
Mm.
mates catching up, which always makes me laugh, sort of thing. It couldn't be any
Well,
different
yeah,
from what
because you're all
the
part of the same
internet.
circus going around, so you're going to get to know everyone, aren't you?
Yeah, it's couldn't be any further than what the internet wants to portray it as.
Mm.
And I've said it on my Twitter, and I'll say it here and now. In my eyes, I think Lewis is probably the greatest driver there's ever been. I got no problem with admitting that. It just fucking annoying having to compete against him for 6 years,
Of
which is
course.
probably the highest praise I can give him.
Absolutely, mate. That's the thing. Vettel was doing it in 2010, 2013, and now Lewis is leading the way. And you're on the other team. There is this kind of like, you know, of course you're Red Bull. That's your team. That's your in the same way that if a refereeing decision goes in West Ham's favour that's wrong, I'm going to be like, oh, it's wrong, but okay, I'm
Yeah,
still
thanks.
happy. You know what I mean? Yeah, because you take them, and it's like, I think it's a bit disingenuous to expect, like if you're going to come to someone who's very, and look, this is guilty of all parties. If you've got a Super Lewis fan or a Super Max fan or a Super Leclerc fan or an Albon fan like me, like obviously I'm going to give Albon a bit more
I
benefit of the
didn't know
doubt
Albon
because,
fans existed, mate.
well, look, I like to think I started the trend, so. He's got a
Influencer.
good little following now, Alex.
Yeah.
People coming on, but they're understanding the privilege that it is to be the pain. I think because I'm a West Ham fan, so it's good at the minute, but it's been chronically painful for my entire
Yeah.
life, which I think I'm just attracted to that.
Yeah. I'm an Arsenal fan, so it's not much better. We're doing all right at the minute, but
Doing right at the minute. You're on that kind of curve back up, so
we've had our
not bad,
moments.
not bad. But also, obviously, all of the stuff, all of the shit show that went off after the end of Abu Dhabi 2021, a lot of it, when I look back at it, I think there's a lot of people who represent, and I think we can talk about this the whole 2021 season, like people who claim to be on one side or the other. And I look at what they say and I think like if Max saw what you were saying, they wouldn't want their face to be on your profile photo. They'd be embarrassed to be, like that you're flying their flag because you're being so divisive and so like angry and anti the other side. When actually
Yeah.
they're just too. Like I saw an interview with Naomi Schiff with Lewis, and he was just like, with him and Max, it's just like normal. Like he knows Max isn't responsible for what happened. He took the opportunity that was presented to him, and he won the championship. But I think there is this kind of absolute polarization online, which just doesn't reflect the real world.
Yeah. I put out a tweet saying something like, if your parents could see what you were tweeting on their Wi-Fi, they'd be very disappointed. So yeah.
It's so good. But what do you think? Because it's like the anonymity, the fact that it's sport, the fact that this season just had so many, like, because I'm not interested in debating with people who are just 100% on one side or the other, because there's no conversation there. I mean, that's not interesting. So like, I don't chat with my, like, if I've got a mate who's like a football fan and just blind, like if you were just like Arsenal, everything Arsenal does is perfect. They're always hard done by. There's no conversation to be had there because there's no nuance to it,
Yeah. And I think it was just a very stressful end of season, a very stressful season, and it's so easy to just type something in that is a bit edgy into 140 characters or whatever it is, and then just hit send. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost a game to some people, I think, where
100%.
they just tweet the edgiest crap. And it's always the ones that don't have their own photo in their profile photo. Things like that, you know what I mean?
Because there's no repercussions.
It's just one of those things, and like I say, it's very easy for anyone to pick up a phone and just tweet shit.
And also, I think people don't realize. I mean, I've had this a few times where like someone's tweeted something, or like not at me directly, but like it's in a thread where I got lumped into the thread at some point, and then I see it and I reply it, and they like. I think a lot of people, because you'll get to a certain following. You've got 25K. I'm at about 70 now.
Yeah, all
And
right,
like,
all right. Jesus.
they'll think that I just wanted to ratio you there. But they'll think you won't see it, and they'll just tweet something horrible, not really thinking, and then you actually see it, and they don't really realize that, like, yeah, I might see it. It's same on YouTube. Like when the first when you go on YouTube, it shows you the most recent comment. So this could be from a video from 2 years ago. If someone commented on a video now, 2 years ago, and I went on my YouTube, that's the first one I'd see. I think people don't realize that, and how much of a, like you say, like you can have one shit comment, and that can just, like, if you're not feeling great that day, that can really hit you,
Yeah, and I think now it's like I said previously, in that it just doesn't bother me now, and I almost treat it like a game. So there was like a guy on Twitter the other day that I tweeted something, And then he replied back, "Oh, you should be worried about being fat." So then I quote tweeted him and did. I don't know if you've probably seen it. The photo of me and my kids paddling pool, topless, and I was like that, and I just said no, and it just becomes a game. It's just like, what's the most bizarre reply you can give, and just
that is the best way of like what's the word, like
you can take the
de-escalating the
venom
situation
out of it if you
Yeah,
turn it
it's
into
like
a
take
joke.
the piss out yourself,
You know,
a bit.
yeah, self-deprecating humor.
That's the one.
Yeah,
that's what I was looking for.
and then it's always tweet deleted like half hour later when they're getting
yeah,
it hasn't gone
because
the
when
way
you
they
put them
thought.
on quote, then there's no hiding from the flames.
Yeah.
But
So, like I say, it's almost like a game now.
do you have many people blocked?
No, I make a point of not blocking people.
Same. Me too. I've muted some people, but I don't block because I see how when other people block, and I see like it's almost like they're like, oh yeah, they block me.
A
I've got
badge of
like
honor.
it's almost like some kind of gives them some kind of validation.
Yeah, I think I've only blocked like a handful of people that were being really sort of abusive towards my
There's
son.
a few when it's just like there's
Yeah,
nothing.
like my son had a very sort of traumatic birth, and for, people were just being really out of order with it, so I blocked them. But I am blocked by Matty from WTF1. He blocked me because I called him a pound and Will Buxton.
No, I love Matt. I've got a very good relation. I used to work with WTF1. That was like my. I'm sure I can be the bridge that brings you back together because I think you two will get along really well. Actually,
It was years ago, and it was only a joke. And now it's become like this slander word for him on Twitter. It's like taken off. Like everyone's like, "Oh, he's a pound and Will Buxton." I got blocked for it like 2-3 years ago.
It's just I'm sure it's I could if you want me to set up the bringer of minds together, you're both good blokes. I'm sure I could make that happen. But but as well, like if you get someone on a bad day or on a good day, you're going to get different reactions. That's the thing as well. Like you've got to kind of when I had Chris on, we were talking about where he gets shot as the messenger a lot because Chris Medland's like one of the first people on putting info out there, and like he'll put something out and then people have got him for him. He's like, I'm just telling you, I'm not this is my opinion, this is just what I've heard. It's difficult, isn't it? It is difficult. Like as it's grown, have you felt more kind of responsibility for what you say now?
So no, not really. And I think this is like a recent sort of shift, because the account started last year. I don't even think it was above 10k. And I've ended the year with like 25k or something. And it was like a frank conversation that I had with someone on Twitter that follows me, and they were like, similar sort of question to you. They were like, "You've got this following, you are, influential. You need to think before you tweet sometimes." And they, fair play. They were completely right, but it's hard to adjust when I still think I'm just tweeting to like 300 of my mates. I haven't quite got my head around the fact that it is a large account. The other day I got, same as you, I got that F1 manager racing chocks thing. It blows my mind that they've DM'd me to say, hey, you know what I mean? Like that's just not what I ever anticipated. So yeah, that's where we're at now, mate. Big things.
That's it. Big time now, man. That's it. It's going in a positive direction. Obviously, now that you've left the Red Bull family, I'm sure you'll be able to enjoy the F1 season as more of a fan because it's not the work. What's the kind of future for engine 11 position 5, but also what's the future for Dan?
So I do have a job. I'm not jobless. I'm not a jobless bum on Twitter.
I'm sure a lot of people haters. On Twitter will that is such a Twitter, just jobless. It's such a Twitter insult.
Touch grass. Yeah, I'll go touch some grass after this podcast.
That's it.
So yeah, no, I do have a role now doing consultancy for like a lot of government, like NHS, universities, things like that, in terms of the things I've learned in F1 in that high pressure environment. How
Yeah.
can I translate that into their sort of situations like the NHS and universities? How can they improve their communications and things like that? So I started that at the start of March. So slow and
Enjoying
steady at
it?
the moment. Yeah, no, it's I'm working from home, mate. So I'm living the dream. I'm around my kids. You know,
That's it,
with
man.
my dog's in the background barking, which you might be able to hear. But so yeah, no, I'm happy with that. But in terms of what I'm going to do, like social and things like that, is, to be honest, mate, again, I'm still trying to get my head around it. Since I've left Red Bull, my NDA has gone, and I'm doing the rounds, talking to people
You're
like you.
free.
Yeah, obviously you're my favourite, sort of thing.
I'm sure you say that to everyone,
You
but
know,
don't worry.
and I tried Twitch for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
but it's difficult to keep a schedule with Twitch because obviously I've got a young family, things
Yep.
like that. So I don't know. I might just do some really shit YouTube videos, a poor imitation of you.
Mate, honestly, like, if you want any advice or help, or do you want to chat about strategy or whatever, we could do it now if you want.
What do you want to
If
talk
you've got an
about?
idea in your mind of this could be the end of the podcast. We can talk about
Okay.
your new YouTube journey if you want.
Yeah. Well, see, again, it's so new. I don't even know what I want to do with it, to be perfectly honest. You
Well,
know.
hang on. Let's start with, because I think so. I know Twitter obviously has Spaces, and I've seen you
Yeah. Yeah.
pop
I've
up
done a
on a few
few of them.
Spaces.
Yeah, they're quite good.
And I think Twitter is looking to implement podcasts as well, which could be a really cool opportunity, because I feel like, you've already got that Twitter platform. Because on,
Yeah.
on YouTube, you're kind of starting from zero. Obviously,
Yeah.
yes, you can carry some of your audience over, but you're already kind of established on Twitter. And I feel like that could be, maybe Spaces first. I'm just thinking out loud here. Then move that into a podcast where it becomes a more like, I don't know how that would be different, because the Space is just a podcast. I don't know how exactly that would be different. That could be cool, and then you establish that, and then, because YouTube's the only difference is that it's just there's video as well, and it's just like, is that something you want to branch into? But I think putting yourself out there first and foremost, it's good, man.
Yeah, and it's one of these sort of age things. Again, boomer alert. Sorry, everyone. But where I
You're
grew
not
up,
that. You're only 4 years between us,
but that
so
4 years makes a lot of difference because it does though. Because I didn't have Facebook in school. You know what I mean? Things like that. I didn't.
I had
YouTube
MSN
wasn't.
Messenger.
Yeah,
Do you remember that? That
yeah.
was, yeah.
But where people nowadays, all sort of the youngsters, content creators, things like that, they've always sort of had that social media in the background, so they're more sort of aware of it, if you know what I mean. Whereas me, I'm a bit like an idiot, and I'm just like,
No, but aren't you fucking glad you didn't have Twitter when you were a kid? Because
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, God, yeah, I
that
couldn't
would be
cope.
terrible.
Yeah, I'd just be calling everyone jobless.
I feel for kids these days who have they're putting out these opinions that will get dragged up in years' time. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
That's where it gets dangerous, because when you're a kid, you do stupid things. That's part of being a kid.
yeah. Well, it's happened before, and people have lost like high-end sports contracts and things like
Yeah,
that, movie roles, because they've tweeted something stupid 10 years
a lot of
ago. And
creators. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so just think before you tweet, which is rich coming from me, but
I was
still.
about to say, or don't.
Yeah, or don't, just fucking send it and see what happens.
Just send it. Yeah, but no, I don't know. I feel like I could really see an Engine 11 Position 5 Twitter space regular. There's a lot less setup when it's audio only as well.
Yeah. Yeah, like we'll tell everyone that before this we did this. I did message you saying, "Are we going to do video? Because I'm going to have to tidy up all the crap in the back of my room to look semi-professional."
It's beautiful.
All my underwear and that I've tidied away. It's not hanging off of dryers and things like that.
Damn it. Yeah, to be fair, actually, because we're moving soon, and I've got loads of boxes just out of frame. So it's like, as long as the frame's fine, it's okay.
Yeah, like the rest of my house looks like a bomb's gone off, but this part is quite neat and tidy.
That's what I feel like the video side of making content isn't as important as the audio, and I feel like I'll look into it after because I'm interested actually to double check whether it was just fake news or whether Twitter podcasts might actually be a
I've
thing.
heard of that as well. Yeah,
Yeah, I feel that could be really good, definitely.
yeah.
And if you start on that early doors as well, you could be like an early adopter. You know, not so much for a boomer, early adopter, Dan, early adopter.
How the turntables.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Well, listen, man. I think should we wrap it up?
sure. Why not? Let's just call every driver mid, every team
Yeah.
mid.
Thank you so much, honestly, mate, for giving me your time. You've been super generous. And obviously follow Dan on Twitter, link in the top line of the description if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening only, it's Engine 11, position 5. Beforehand, I was like, if I say Engine 5, position 11, I'm going to be... But fortunately, you put it in your name on Riverside, so I know which one. I know which number comes first. But Dan, have you enjoyed your time chatting?
Oh, it's been a pleasure. You've been a beautiful host, wonderful,
Oh, stop
professional.
it! Stop it.
You know, and when I overtake you on YouTube, I will remember you as a stepping stone as I climbed over you.
Ooh, big words. Well, you got to beat me on Twitter first, so
yeah, true.
maybe
I'll
focus on
just...
that before
Right,
you
hang
come
on.
for
Let
me
me
on
just type
YouTube. Yeah?
Charles Leclerc is mid and send. And see what sort of reply we get from that.
Every day because the Charles Leclerc fan. Tell you what, Charles has got some quiet. I remember I was complimentary to Carlos Sainz once, and then I got loads of Charles fans having a go at me. I'm like, I'm just being nice to Carlos.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
Charles is a red flag merchant. Send.
He loves a red flag. It matches his overalls. So yeah, mate, that's a wrap. There's no outro to this podcast, and that is now the outro. Goodbye, everyone.